Welcome to John Martin Talks, where we battle ignorance and apathy daily. The growing ignorance of just how special this experiment we call the United States of America is, and the apathy that we can't or won't do anything and everything to save her. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we got a great show for you today. We're going to start out with something that seems to be something that we should have been doing all along. Part of one of President Trump's promises, but also in response to the coronavirus. President has stated that he is going to suspend immigration of all kinds into the country for a period of time, and there's some details to follow. And then kind of a theme that we've been talking about for the last week or so, government with this coronavirus and the shutdown and everything, government seems to be everywhere. Is there any way to rein it back in once we've kind of let the jackass, the donkey out the barn? We'll talk about that. And then, of course, everybody's abuzz right now about who the VP pick for Joe Biden is. And many are hoping, wishing, praying, and speculating that it might be the one and only Michelle Obama. So we'll get into the chances of that, the pros, the cons, and the reality of that in just a moment. But we start with President Trump and suspending immigration. This is from a Politico story. Trump says he'll suspend immigration into the U.S. President Donald Trump on Monday night said that he was suspending immigration into the U.S. because of the coronavirus pandemic. Now, he tweeted this. This is what he tweeted. In light of the attack from the invisible enemy, as well as the need to protect the jobs of our great American people, I will be signing an executive order to temporarily suspend immigration into the United States. Well, for that, I say spot on, Mr. President. And also, I think I share a little bit of frustration of many Americans, many people who supported you, Mr. President. And I got to say, it's about time. I mean, President Trump overall has been very solid on the border. There's a lot of speculation as to how much walls actually been built versus repaired, how much is actually still under construction, immigration. It has been a little bit of a mixed bag on immigration. I do think overall President Trump has done a pretty decent job, maybe the best he could, maybe not the best he should, but given the sorry state of our immigration laws and the state of our immigration policies and our security at the border before President Trump took office, he has done a remarkable job based on that. Is it enough? Well, we could certainly speculate on that, and we'll talk about that as the story and the show unfolds. The announcement stood in contrast, talking about President Trump's announcement about suspending immigration. The announcement stood in contrast to Trump's recent messages of cautious optimism about the country soon reemerging from weeks of lockdowns designed to contain the virus. Now, they use the word cautious optimism. You know, I think the president has been just that, cautiously optimistic. I don't believe that he's been pushing it too hard. As you know, my big question yesterday was who gave the authority to anybody, president, governors alike, to actually shut us down? And we might talk more about that in a moment. But if you want to see in depth on that issue, check out our podcast from yesterday. There are several ways to do that. If you're on Facebook, go directly to John Martin Talks Facebook page, like it, and share it with others. Check out our YouTube channel. We're now up to date and broadcasting every day on our John Martin Talks, spell it all the way out, YouTube channel. And we certainly would appreciate you subscribing there. We need to get our viewership up on there, so we may get a few advertisements and do a little capitalism from YouTube, and we need your help with doing that. You can also catch us on America's Voice News Network on everything from your streaming channels like Roku, Fire Stick, Apple TV. Download the free app on Android, iPhone. Check us out on Pluto TV Network, a streaming network. And we're on America's Voice News Show, which is not only on your streaming channels, but now is on channel 219 of Dish Network. So there are many ways to check us out. But cautious optimism, that is probably a pretty good description of what President Trump has been trying to do in regards to opening the economy. The president has repeatedly tried to downplay the severity of the outbreak since its arrival in the country. Now, this is from the article. And his push to reopen the economy has put him at odds with some of the nation's governors and at times his top health experts. Now, see, this is where I definitely don't agree with the media on this, where it says that President Trump has tried to downplay the severity. I don't think that's true at all. Now, like many people, was he caught slightly flat-footed based on the information we were getting out of China? Yeah, you could make a case that everybody was. But the president reacted quicker than anybody else. Keep in mind, and we'll show you this picture of this timeline, what we call the coronavirus timeline. I've posted this several times on various Facebooks. But the president reacted by banning flights from China at the end of January 31st. And you could see that all these Democrats were basically calling him everything but a child of God by doing this, a racist, everything, xenophobe. And they were encouraging people to do activities that were now locked down for doing. The Democrats were the ones that downplayed the severity of this, not President Trump. Now, as I say, you could argue that all of them were slow to respond, and I think that was largely due to the lack of information coming out of China itself. Trump did not hint at making any drastic immigration moves during his lengthy daily coronavirus news briefing early Monday evening. And that's true. He didn't say anything really about it. Immigration, he didn't get asked a question either, which is primarily what he does at those things, answer questions. Immigration has largely taken a backseat during the pandemic as the president hopes to salvage a strong economy that had become one of the major campaign points in the lead up to the November election. Before I move any further, another reason to watch us here on John Martin Talks is because we broadcast via America's Voice News the daily press conferences in their entireties. A lot of people have complained, and rightfully so, that they get cut away from on the news networks. You can watch them in their entirety on a daily basis through America's Voice News and right here on John Martin Talks. That's a service we are happy to bring to you. But here's an idea I had that could actually resolve some immigration issues and provide for the defense of the country. How about if we have like a WPA, which is a program that was started during the Great Depression about putting people to work, government paying them, which is what we're kind of doing now, right? But actually required people to work for that money. And they did all kind of projects, from building national parks to infrastructure projects. What if we actually started a project like that for building the wall? That we actually paid American citizens to go down there with stimulus money, whatever you want to call it, and build a wall. How about, and I know this sounds like it's really cruel according to the left, what if we actually said, hey, if you're trying to immigrate into this country, one of the things you have to do is help us build a wall, and people could earn their right to come in this country. Their first job, so to speak, in coming to this country would be helping to build a wall. Build a wall, as I've been saying, better for us all. When asked what promoted the decision, a top Department of Homeland Security official responded, 22 million unemployed Americans and counting due to COVID-19. So they're essentially saying, look, we got up over 22 million people. Most people project that thing to go to a minimum of 30 million people unemployed. And there are some people who say it might, if we don't get this economy going, it could get to 100 million people unemployed. But certainly, I don't think 30 or 40 million, since we've passed 22 million, is out of the question. So yeah, we could, it doesn't make much sense to be importing labor when we have Americans unemployed. And of course, it's just the right thing to do. How about following U.S. law? All this time we've been hearing, oh, our immigration system is broken, it needs to be fixed, all of this kind of stuff. And it's all been a bunch of, as old Vice President Biden would say, it's been a bunch of malarkey. Our system is not broken. It could be overwhelmed a bit, but our immigration system, if it is overwhelmed, is not because it's broken, it's because it has been ignored by presidents on both sides of the political aisle for decades. That's the real problem. And Donald Trump inherited one heck of a mess when it came to immigration, illegal and legal, when he started as president. And he's been trying his best, I do believe. Is it as much as he should? Maybe not. As much as he could? Probably so. But what is Biden's position on this now that he is the presumptive nominee? What is Joe Biden's position on immigration? Well, I think we have a pretty good clue of what the Democratic Party in general feels about immigration, because there may be a handful of things that the 2020 field disagreed on, but one thing they were absolutely all in cahoots with, or in total agreement, was that that we should be giving free stuff to illegal immigrants, thus enticing them to come here. I want to play a video, a short clip from the 2020, back in 2019, the 2020 Democratic field, when they were asked a question about illegal, and keep in mind they say immigrants, but they're talking about illegal, undocumented, which means illegal immigrants coming to the United States. And notice the presumptive nominee, he's like, well, what? Yeah, I'm for it. Check this out.
We've been talking tonight about these government health care plans that you've proposed in one form or another. This is a show of hands question, and hold them up for a moment so people can see. Raise your hand if your government plan would provide coverage for undocumented immigrants. Okay. Let me start with you, Mayor Buttigieg. Why?
That's good enough. So you saw that, and then that was one night when they had 2 nights of debates because they had so many, and they're all for it. See old Biden going like, "Oh yeah, I'm for it." If you're forgiving, think about this: if you're forgiving free medical care to illegal immigrants that sneak across our border, basically you're for open borders and a welfare state, correct? I mean, that's what it amounts to. And keep in mind that Julian, whatever his name, Castro, that was running, he is still for making it legal to cross. In other words, decriminalizing, making illegal immigrants basically a moot point, that anybody could come here without any fear of penalty. So think about that for a moment. If you can come here without any fear of being deported, you're going to get free medical care, which American citizens don't get, by the way, and you're going to get free housing and everything else. A lot of people say, oh, illegal immigrants don't get welfare. Nonsense. They may not get direct payments. Of course, they're starting to get that out in California right now. But have you ever noticed when you see the homeless in LA and San Francisco that there are few, if any, illegal immigrants in the crowd? That's because they're being housed. So they're given free housing, free medical care, in-state tuition, that kind of stuff for college, basically a bunch of free stuff. And you don't think that from the world economy going down to the fact that there's a threat of now virus, let alone gang violence and everything else, that people aren't going to continue to bum rush the border and bring us all down? I don't know if you saw, we're not going to get too in depth on this, but it's kind of a follow-up to a story that you probably heard here first about the threat to our energy industry. The price of a barrel of oil yesterday for a time being went to negative $30 a barrel. Negative $30 a barrel. That means that if you have oil production, you have to pay somebody to actually take your oil. You don't get paid for it. You have to pay people to take it to the refineries and take it from you. And you may say, well, how is that possible? It's because once production starts, it's not easy to turn it on and off like a light switch. So they keep producing oil even though there is less than zero demand for it. How long do you think that'll last before our total energy industry is in a state of collapse? Probably it's imminent right now. So we got a lot of issues here, and we need to address them. And starting with our border would be a big deal because we need to put America first and Americans first. Trump has faced calls from conservatives to stop allowing foreign workers to enter the U.S. because millions of Americans are out of work after shutdowns to stop the spread of the virus. But for weeks, and a lot of people don't know this, but we've been allowing, and when they say we, I'm talking about the United States of America under the presidency of Donald Trump. I'm just going to call it like it is. I love me some Trump, but the facts are the facts. But for weeks, his administration, talking about the president, allowed them to enter. So why would anybody be opposed to shutting the border down and shutting off immigration, at least temporarily, legal and illegal, for a time during our current situation? Who would be opposed to that? Well, I can tell you who would be opposed to that. People who believe in cheap labor and want the votes that illegals might bring to the Democratic Party. There's an unholy alliance. I haven't talked about this in a while, but if I say it, it bears repeating. There has been an unholy alliance between the Chamber of Commerce Republican crowd and the we wanted votes to come from anywhere Democratic Party crowd. And they have looked the other way on immigration because the Republican side, represented by the Chamber of Commerce, like the Koch brothers, and there's only one brother left now, they want cheap labor. So they're for open borders for cheap labor. And the Democrats, of course, are for open border so they can fundamentally change America. And that's the unholy alliance that's been happening for quite some time. But there's this term out there, jobs Americans won't do. And of course, that could change drastically considering the unemployment if it goes to 30 million or 40 million like some people are projecting. But there's a reason why there's jobs that Americans won't do. Because we have created such a cheap labor deal where it becomes an agriculture, construction. See, here's things that people don't talk about very much. When they think about illegal immigrants coming in, they're always saying, well, who's going to pick the fruit or the cabbage out the patch and everything else? Farm workers. And that is a big issue. I'm not downplaying it at all. But there are a lot of illegal immigrants who come here that take jobs Americans certainly would do and are standing in line to get, and that is good construction jobs. A lot of illegal immigrant labor is used in the field of construction, landscaping. It's not just, and processing at plants like chicken processing plants and all. It's not just picking fruit off the trees, but Americans can do that. When I was a kid, we had very little immigrant labor. We had migratory workers that would come through from time to time, but most of the watermelons and those types of things, beans, there was a lot of agriculture happening in my community when I was a kid. It was done by American citizens of all races, creeds, and colors. I've picked my share of watermelons and beans and everything else, but I guess those times are changing. The reason why it became totally immigrant, first of all, it was cheaper. There's no question about that. But the jobs Americans won't do thing irritates me because part of it is not only the cheap labor, but we've been disincentivizing Americans to work. We've been paying people basically not to work. And that's one of the things that concerns me about this stimulus package is getting back into paying Americans. And in the case of this stimulus package, maybe more not to work. Now, I realize they don't have the jobs, but it's going to be interesting to see how many people run back into jobs if they're available, if they calculate that they're making more on between the stimulus and the new unemployment payments and all that. They may be making more or at least a certain amount to stay at home. And that's been a part of our system for a while. The welfare system has helped create this idea that there are jobs Americans won't do. But I digress. But I do think the president is reacting in a sane manner here. Specifically, the U.S. eased requirements for immigrants to get certain jobs, such as farm workers, landscapers, and crab pickers, whatever that is. I know what crabbers are. Aware that certain industries include those that fill grocery store shelves could be hurt if they couldn't hire foreign employees. It also has begun easing the process, talking about the United States government, easing the process for companies to look to hire foreign workers, altering some paperwork requirements, including allowing electronic signatures and waiving the physical inspection of documents. I know this may upset a few people, and I hate to put caveats on it, but I think you know that if you've watched our show any length of time, you know I'm a strong supporter of President Trump. Nothing has wavered me from that. but I got to call it as I see it. One of the dark spots, to a certain extent, on President Trump's administration, and you got to say the buck stops at the presidency, and it's not solely his responsibility, but we have continued to allow, and we being the United States federal government, allow people to come here both legally and illegally to take jobs directly from American people. In some cases, it's not just people coming here illegally, say, to pick fruit. It's also people coming here legally and taking very high paying jobs with innovation, technology, and all that. I mean, the Googles of the world are looking to hire people from other countries all the time. And this is definitely a dark spot and something that President Trump should be criticized on. He needs to, right now, let's put it this way. If under President Trump, if we're not going to stop immigrants, legal or illegal, from coming here and taking jobs from Americans now, if we're not going to stop them now, when are we ever going to do it? And so I applaud the president for getting woke and putting a little bit of teeth to some of his talk, and let's hope that he follows through on this. Immediately after the president's tweet on Monday night, I love this term, hardline immigration groups cheered the decision. Hardline. What is the definition of a hardline immigration group? Could it be somebody who simply says we need to have America first? Could it be someone who says that that no nation is truly a sovereign nation if it can't defend its own borders? Does that make you hardline? Think about that a minute. If you stand up and say, look, one of the first responsibilities, if not the chief responsibility of the President of the United States is to defend our borders, make us a sovereign nation. Is that hardline? If that is, that shows you just how far we have slipped away from the Constitution of the United States, that policy, that thought process is now considered hardline. Said Roy Beck, president of Numbers USA, which supports these kind of restrictions, the president's comments reflect a sensitivity to a primary purpose of all immigration laws of every country, and that is to protect a nation's vulnerable workers. Here's another thing. A lot of people, we've kind of forgotten this, that one of the reasons why we have borders is actually to prevent infectious disease. Have you ever noticed, and it's not getting much play these days, that it used to be big time before you could get like a passport, especially to certain countries, you had to have certain types of vaccinations and everything, and you had to pass certain medical checks, people coming in here, because one of the main purposes of immigration laws and borders was to protect the country from infectious disease. That's not new to this pandemic, but it's something we've kind of ignored. With tens of millions of Americans who want to work, this is back to this gentleman's comments, who want to work full time, not able to, most immigration makes no sense today. And to allow it to continue at its current level at this time would show a callous disregard for those enduring deep economic suffering. Preach on, sir. And the congregation said, amen. Because to me, he is absolutely spot on this, and I hope the president is listening. Trump's decision will anger the business community, including the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. It's important to point out that there's a kind of a difference between like your local Chamber of Commerce, which is primarily made up of local businesses, and what they call the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which is made up, quite frankly, of companies that once were American companies, but are now globalist companies. So when you look at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, don't confuse it with your local Chamber of Commerce, because the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is for open government globalism, not for your local community. That's my opinionated fact, but a fact nonetheless. But including the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which has argued that foreign workers are critical to companies that might be unable to find enough unemployed Americans willing to take certain jobs. Enough unemployed. The number is over 22 million, literally as we speak, Americans who have filed for unemployment. Now, assuming we don't pay them more to stay at home, don't you think there's a possibility that if that figure doubles, let alone the 22 million, but it could easily double in the coming weeks if we don't change what we're doing. And even if we do, it's probably going to go up. Don't you think that there may be very few jobs that Americans aren't willing to take, if any? Despite Trump's campaign vow to reduce immigration, the number of immigrants, now people need to understand this, and once again, I'm all about Trump 2020, all about it. We need him to win desperately re-election. But the truth is the truth. Despite Trump's campaign vow to reduce immigration, the number of immigrants with temporary visas has steadily increased during his presidency, reaching 925,000 in 2018, according to the Migration Policy Institute. Is there any wonder why people like Ann Coulter, who used to be one of the president's biggest supporters, have come out and, in a sense, she's been probably a harsh critic on this. She's basically said it's over. You know, that this experiment of America is basically over because we're not obviously going to do anything about illegal immigration. And I think she's been a little over the top with that, but I get her frustration. I understand where it's coming from because, she's been a staunch anti-illegal immigrant and even gone so far as to be opposed to legal immigration. So she's been upset with the president. As I say, sometimes it's over the top, but sometimes it's not. And the president would do well to heed what a lot of the American people build the wall, sir. Better for all. Representative Joaquin Castro, Democrat from Texas, who ran for, actually I guess it was his brother who ran for Congress, chairman of the House Hispanic Caucus. Ran for president. If you hear some thunder, we got some thunder and lightning coming in our background here. Chairman of the House Hispanic Caucus and vice chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, condemned Trump's remarks as a mere diversion from the criticism the president has been receiving for his response to the virus. Interesting that they would say that. This action is not only an attempt to divert attention, this is what Castro said. This action is not only an attempt to divert attention from Trump's failure to stop the spread of coronavirus and save lives, which is what he's trying to do by shutting the border down, which is what he did when he shut it down, the first leader in the world to shut down travel, certainly major leader from China. That's what he's been doing, sir, to try to save lives. But an authoritarian-like move to take advantage of a crisis, advance his anti-immigration agenda, we must come together to reject his division. Now keep in mind, this is from a man whose brother literally campaigned, and I'm sure they're in agreement on this, with making it decriminalizing crossing the border. So not only would it not be illegal to cross our border, but we're going to give you tons of free stuff, welcome you in, give you a job, give you housing and everything else. How many people are going to be bum rushing the border for that? So the way I look at it, ladies and gentlemen, is the president is on the right track with this. We need to secure our borders, period, for multiple reasons, but certainly getting back to the original reason that we had borders in the first place was to stop the spread of infectious disease. That's one of the main things our immigration laws were written to start with. No one's talking about that. Go back and look at it. You could Google it, but Google is of the devil. But check it out. I'm right on this. I'm telling you. But we need to make everyone accountable. We need to hold everyone accountable. And that includes President Trump. We as supporters of President Trump need to hold him accountable. And I believe he's, like I say, I think President Trump, under the circumstances, has done a terrific job on multiple issues, including the border. But he needs to do more. And this is certainly a major step in the right direction. And this kind of brings us to our next story. And that is this idea, and this is a Washington Post story, which is hard for me to believe they would even bring attention to this. But the title is "Government is Everywhere Now. Where does it go next?" So basically they're saying that government has been growing for decades, probably for centuries in the United States, and it's on an accelerated process because of this pandemic, and where does it stop if it does? And I don't think it will. And where will it go? It's a very interesting read here. Americans are experiencing the biggest expansion of government authority in generations as elected leaders take unprecedented action to fight the deadly coronavirus pandemic. Take advantage of a crisis. Isn't that the theme of the Democratic Party? Rahm Emanuel famously said, "Don't let a good crisis go to waste." Well, government has never let a crisis go to waste, and they certainly aren't now. And the socialists are definitely, and the communists are definitely pushing for, essentially, if you look at it, we've had a total takeover by government of our lives in its entirety now. Government literally is this thing, they're literally telling you, like, basically where to go, where not to go, who to associate, who not to associate with, how you can associate with people, what you can buy, what you can't buy. Is there any area that they're not dictating you right now, your behavior? Anything? Let me know. Where you can go to church, all of this kind of stuff. I don't see any place that the government is not in direct contact with us at this moment. Americans, it says, they're experiencing the biggest. Let me move on here. The role of government has changed overnight. I'm not sure that's true. I think it's expanded overnight in ways no one imagined as this election year began. Despite a broad consensus behind this emergency surge in government, according to this writer, government spending and power, a huge debate, he says, over what government does and should do lies ahead. I hope he's right about that. I have my doubts that we'll actually have a big debate about that. We haven't so far. I mean, we're seeing glimmers of hope in some of the protests that people are doing. And of course, since they're wearing MAGA hats, they're somewhat dismissed for doing it. But I hope we have a broader debate right now. We don't have to wait till this crisis is over, because it may not be over for years. Think about that. It may not be over for years. There's no guarantee we're going to have vaccination on this. I hope we do. But keep in mind, the flu vaccination is not like 100%. So there's no evidence to me that this vaccine is going to be 100%, assuming we get it. But I hope we have some debates on this, but I have my doubts. The battle will be waged about expansion of government on terms that could be far different from those that existed before the pandemic. Terms that have held sway since Ronald Reagan arrived in Washington 4 decades ago, determined to put advocates of vigorous government on the defense for the first time since the Green New Deal. And they're absolutely correct. President Reagan was the first president elected really with the idea that we need to limit government. There were other people who proposed it, but they didn't get elected. President Reagan got elected. But the reality is, ladies and gentlemen, that even during Reagan's presidency and what followed, government continued to expand. Not just money and everything else, but government and the role in our lives continued to expand. It's continued to expand even under President Trump before this pandemic. Before this pandemic, I repeat, government has been on a steady increase since we basically first founded it. And it is sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, but it has always materialized. And the only thing that people like Reagan were able to do in reality is somewhat call attention and slow it down. It's not like it decreased. And the Tea Party, think about the Tea Party. The Tea Party has largely come and gone, right? Now, there are elements of the Tea Party, I think to a certain extent, it was absorbed by the MAGA agenda, the MAGA movement, and that type of thing. But the Tea Party, one of their primary principles was limited government, right? Well, how much has government been limited since the Tea Party? Now, I was a part of the Tea Party. It was an amazing movement, and I've got some terrific friends that I made during that movement and still hold them dear today. But the growth of government has been steady. So the Tea Party slowed it down, but it didn't stop its steady progression. They did not. And I don't think anybody really associated with the Tea Party would argue that. But if you don't agree with me, or even if you agree, let me know. Chime in on whatever Facebook network you're listening to and let me know. I'll get back to you as soon as I possibly can. The pandemic has exposed crippling weaknesses in the federal government, back to the writer here, and troubling vulnerabilities in society that will be more difficult to ignore when the crisis begins to ease. Time will tell, right? It's going to be difficult. Government never likes to give back power. Politicians and government never, once they get power, they're pretty reticent to give it back. For the first time, many Americans are looking to government for their very economic survival. That is true. In time, that could make them look at government differently. We could all become totally dependent on government. Most of us have some dependency on government right now. It just do. We're addicted to government. There is no doubt about it. And this is true, but what they're saying here in this paragraph is true, but government is still the problem. It's not anti-government, it's limited government, one that is for the people and by the people. But it is in danger of perishing from the earth. Not government, but one for the people and by the people is in danger. The efforts of hollowed out, I like this term here, the effects of hollowed out federal agencies, persistent underinvestment in public health, enormous gaps in coverage and disparities in care have been on daily display as the coronavirus spread rapidly this winter and spring. Hollowed out federal agencies. How many agencies have actually been hollowed out? How many have actually been done away with? I mean, if you went and studied the different agencies, it's amazing to go back and look at things that are funded, still funded, that don't really even exist right now. Like, how to protect the wagon wheel or something like that. I mean, when was the last time a government agency was hollowed out? The definition of hollowed out by the progressives is it hasn't been expanded. Think about it this way. We talk about, we need to cut the deficit, or we need to cut the budget, or when the Republicans are cutting the budget, they're cutting the thing out. I just wish that were true. I wish that Republicans could rightly be accused of cutting the budget. President Trump has not cut the budget one penny. I hate to tell you that. President Trump has not, and the Republicans, when they held both houses, have not cut the budget by a single penny. And I say that, and let me explain it very quickly. If you're in your household and you said, okay, I'm just going to use real simple math. Last year, we spent $100,000 in your business, your household, or whatever. And this year has been better. So we're going to increase our budget to $110,000. That's a budget increase, right? So that's how the government does. Say, okay, we're going to increase our budget. And then you turned around, you and your wife got together, your wife, husband, whatever, got together, you individually, and said, I want to have a little bit of a rainy day fund. So instead of increasing my budget by $10,000, I'm only going to increase it by $5,000. Now that's not a cut in your budget. That is a reduce in the rate of your spending increase, correct? The government operates that way. They will propose a spending increase every year, and then they'll cut it back. It'll still be more than it was last year, but that decrease in the rate of spending is called a budget cut. And I'm here to tell you, and MAGA people, you need to understand this, and I'm not saying go anywhere else. Trump is our only choice. He's our best choice and our only choice. I'm not saying he's not. But the reality is that Republicans nor Democrats have actually cut the budget in forever. There have been varying degrees of cuts to the rate of increase. And one thing about Democrat, you will never hear from a Democrat. You'll never hear a Democrat say, well, we got this great program and we got all the money we need. You'll never, ever hear that. Think about it this way. One of our great senators here from the state of Florida, Connie Mack, and his son later campaigned on it as well, wasn't successful. He was at the state level, but not the national. Connie Mack Jr. proposed something called the penny plan. And the penny plan essentially said that we would have an automatic cut across the board for every single agency of 1%. So 1 penny per dollar. 1%, so a 1% budget cut across the board, no questions asked. That can't be passed. It has never been passed because the federal government, led by both Democrats and unfortunately Republicans, cannot cut even one penny. So I don't know. I hope we have a debate about this, but I don't believe we will. Not the American people might, and some politicians, but rising to the level of actually doing something about it. If it's meant to be, it's up to you and me. So too have the effects of an economy whose benefits are distributed unequally. I keep hearing that. Leaving the richest Americans secure while millions of middle and lower class families struggle even in the best of times. That is a total Democratic talking point. The vast majority, and I'm not saying that millionaires and billionaires didn't do better when the economy is going, but everybody was doing pretty dadgum good before this pandemic hit. And that scared the Democrats more than anything else. But let me just let you in on a little secret. Being a billionaire has always been pretty good. It ain't going to change. You think that somehow that's going to change? It may be less of them, but the ones that are left, which are pretty much all Democrats, it seems like, they're going to do all right. And it says here, and these are not the best of times, I would agree with that. To hold down the number of deaths from COVID-19, government has put the economy in a coma and recession by federal fiat. And as I said yesterday, and I'm going to repeat it, who gave them permission to do that? Who gave permission? This debate about who has the authority to open up the government again or open up the economy again, whether it's President Trump, the governors, or some combination. What I really want to see us do is have a debate at some point as to who gave anybody the power to do that, from the president down to the governors. Show me in the Constitution where it gives them authority, other than maybe martial law, which hasn't been declared, to tell us where we go to work, what we can buy like that. And I mean, that's not in the Constitution, and that's not just President Trump. This action by the federal government and the local state governments has been in the makings for decades. The coronavirus didn't create it. It just exposed the hunger for greater, larger government. Government has intervened in the market in other ways as well, delivering billions in bailouts to airlines, distress industries, while haltingly commanding General Motors and 3M through the Defense Production Act to manufacture ventilators and protective masks. Here's the thing. When I was in high school, and I don't know when they quit doing it, but when I was in high school, and I'm sure a lot of you my age, maybe even a little bit younger than me, remember Americanism versus communism. We had a required course where we had to take Americanism versus communism. That is, not only is the course no longer taught, which is a shame, but the subject doesn't even matter anymore. It's not we're at a point right now, and this pandemic has exposed it. It's not Americanism versus communism. It's socialism versus communism. So it's like a foregone conclusion. We're moving to becoming a socialist nation. I mean, President Trump said America will never become a socialist nation. And I think he was right to say that. But the reality is we are becoming a socialist nation without even casting a vote for it at this moment, let alone what we could vote. So the debate is, talk about nationalizing industries and stuff like that. And the Democrats are like, they call President Trump a fascist, but they're like bemoaning that he's not fascist enough right now. I mean, think about how the debate has gone from President Trump is a fascist to essentially he needs to be more fascist. It's just crazy. So I would maintain that Americanism versus communism not only is not taught anymore, but the debate isn't even happening. It's now socialism versus communism. And somehow communist China is like the good guy. It's crazy, man. It's sad, it's frustrating, and it's scary. Let me check. I'm not going to get very far on all. This is just an important story. So I probably won't get past some of these other stories. Check my time. I'm almost out of time now. But anyway, we're just going to stick with this one story and kind of finish it out. I'm sorry to not, we'll try to get to the others later. But here's this one paragraph I want to say real quick. Government has also changed personal behavior, recommending in some cases ordering people to stay home, practice social distancing, wear a mask outdoors, and in some places under the threat of fines and penalties. And it's talking about now what's coming next is tracing people. where their disease is going. So they're wanting you to name names, and they're going to say, where's your papers? I mean, that's where we're heading to right now. And don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying we don't need to take precautions, but we're about to throw the baby out with the bathwater if we haven't already. And let me scroll to the end. That I can't believe it took me this much time to do it, but I guess I'm just on a roll here. Democrats 2020. Democrats, we need to have Donald Trump reelected without a doubt. There is no question about it. We need to have Donald Trump reelected. And here's the last thing I'll say, and we'll stop, and I'll talk about Michelle Obama maybe tomorrow. We'd have to have courage in this country. Courage, the definition of courage is not to be fearless, because only insane people have no fears. Courage means to face your fears, overcome them, and do your dadgum job. That is what we have to do as an Americans. The choice, ladies and gentlemen, is ultimately up to us. Will the American experiment end? Remember what Ronald Reagan said, and we'll close with this. Show it up there. Ronald Reagan, if you can, where he, there we go. Check that out. It's not passed down in the bloodstream, and he's right. We're in danger of losing everything we have fought for in this generation right now. And I'm not talking about individual people, like millennials, whatever, but as a whole, everybody who's alive right now, we are responsible. And whatever happens in this nation, we can't leave it up to the elected officials. It's got to be up to you and me. Hope you've enjoyed the show as much as I've enjoyed bringing it to you. Please go directly to John Martin Talks Facebook page, like it, share it with others. I'll pray for your family. You pray for mine. But above all else, like I say each and every day, from my heart, from my family to yours, have a blessed day.